name is Bahman Mirshab. I'm Dean, College of Business Information Technology, formerly College of Management. It's my distinct pleasure at this time to introduce our President, President Brinder Madgid, to welcome you and start the program. President Madgid.
Thank you, Dean Mirshab. Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the series. Plant Moran needs to be thanked for the wonderful job they have done to sponsor this series, to bring the CEOs and leaders, the thought leaders in the area to come on this series and share with you thoughts and how we can make our work a special place. Today is no exception. We have a star presenter later who will be presented to you shortly, who has been transformative at this institution and at many. I do not know personally, a faculty colleague or administrative colleague who has been invited more than 30 different countries to share her thoughts, how we converse, conversation worth having. And I was coming today from Telegraph. Some of you come from that side. There's one or two roads closed. The line was like 2 miles long. I said, I cannot be late for this. I need to have a conversation. So as you come to the campus, many of you have been here before, and we're very grateful for that. You see many, many changes. Each time you come here, you see something else has changed for better. We have new facilities, we have new programs, new partnerships with the city, with the hospital, in the community, with the corporations. And today, later on, we will be dedicating the newest building on campus, which is a residence hall for 300 new students. Freshmen will be living there. At 2 o'clock, we will dedicate that one as well. It is in line with your presence here, because when the leaders like you come to this campus, you also share your thoughts during coffee or intermingling, and that helps us to produce the kind of institution and program we wish to have and that you recommend. Today's topic is an exceptional because Jackie Stavros, our colleague, friend, is internationally renowned for her work. Her book was recently noticed all over the country. In fact, Stephen Forbes magazine interviewed her because of that book, what it actually presented to the reader and to our communities and leaderships. And she was extensively interviewed, and it was printed in the Forbes magazine, one of the recent editions. That simply speaks for how seriously she is noticed and followed and understood. And today will be no exception. You'll have a treat. So please enjoy, and we continue to have you come back because it is you who bring a lot of excitement to this campus, and we hope to continue. Thank you. Enjoy the sit.
Good morning, everyone. I'm John Beavis with Plant Moran. We're one of the sponsors of the series, and I have the pleasure of introducing Jackie today. I'll give you a little bit of a background on her. She has a passion for working with others to create meaningful results for positive change. She's a professor here at Lawrence Tech. I know many of you know that. She also is the Appreciative Inquiry Advisor for the Flourishing Leadership Institute and the David L. Copperrider Center for Appreciative Inquiry. She just co-authored a new book, Conversations Worth Having, using appreciative inquiry to fuel productivity and meaningful engagement. So this is the book. If you haven't got it yet, I would encourage you to. It's very good. I figured I better read it if I was going to be up here introducing her, so took care of that. Just to let you know, Jackie's worked in a number of sectors, including not-for-profit, for-profit, government, and a wide spectrum of industries. She's been in over 25 countries using appreciative inquiry to affect the lives of thousands of people and hundreds of organizations. She has her doctorate in management from the Weatherhead School of Management at Case Western Reserve. She earned her MBA at Michigan State University and her BA at Wayne State. She lives in Brighton, Michigan with her husband, Paul, who I know is here taking pictures down in front, and her kids, Allie and Adam. Adam is up in the corner. Allie, I think, is sick today, so she's not here. And we asked her not to bring Rex, her lovable dog, because we didn't think it would work in the room here. But please help me in welcoming Jackie.
Good morning. Thank you. I know you all have choices every morning, but thank you for coming here, except Paul and the faculty and the staff probably had to come. So I want to thank you. The dean challenged me this morning to do a talk that was a little interactive versus me talking to you the whole time. And I'm always up for a good challenge. And if you will see, does everybody have a packet? Because when you walked in, if they don't have packets, I'll ask if Donna's outside if we can bring some more packets in. They're all gone. Okay, so Dr. Marburger, when do you need those packets for your meeting? When do you need those packets for your meeting tonight?
15.
Okay, so I have 15 in here, and I'll just reproduce it later for Dr. Marburger. So did anybody not get handouts? Because I'll ask Donna if you just put your hand up, this is what's in the packet. We're going to steal Dr. Marburger's stuff, but we'll get you new stuff. I was prepared. Thank you, Donna. Okay, so in your packets, you are going to have, it's quite colorful. You are going to have a note card. Cheryl Mitchell needs ones over there. So just hold your hand up, and this is the most important part because we're going to do a little bit of activities. And these two people right up front here, there's a few more people that need packets. And then I owe Dr. Marburger something afterwards, some more packets. Okay, so conversations. Pull out your note card, and I hope you got one of those really nice pens from Plant Moran. I get them every time. They're one of my 3 favorite pens. And I want you guys to pull this note card out, and the first question should be easy. In the top left-hand corner, write down your name, what you like people to call you. Some people call me Dr. Stavros, some call me Jacqueline. I like the introduction, it was Jackie. My husband will call me Jack. Some call me Hey Professor. So write your name, whatever you want to be called, and make a little T. And in your T, I want you a little T, where's my accounting faculty? A little T chart. On the left side, put other, and on the right side, put self. Other and self. And so I want you to write down the 3 things you think should be developed in others. In the workplace, some of you are on sports teams and organizations, but what are 3 things you want to develop in people, if you could? Think of the workforce. What are others? If you're getting a job, what are the 3 top things you should develop? And then in the right-hand side, write down 3 things of self. What are 3 things that you would like to get better at? 3 strengths, 3 things that you would like to do. So just kind of take a moment. Hopefully you got your name on that left-hand thing. 3 things you'd like to develop in others, and 3 things in yourself. So what I want you to do is introduce yourself, pairs, 3 people. Swati, you'll have to jump over, someone behind you, and and just say, hey, I'm Jackie. Here are 3 things I think should be developed in others, the 3 skill sets that I think are really important. And you don't have to share about yourself, but what do you think needs to be developed in others, okay? You guys ready? All right, introduce yourself to somebody. Only 3 things. Can I have your attention back? All right, up here. See, if I put you in an exercise, it's hard to get your attention back, but I can feel the energy. So let's just hear from a couple people. What is one thing you think needs to be developed in people? People skills.
Reliability.
Reliability.
Active listening. Turn off Facebook.
Active listening. Max. Okay, now, I'm going to go to the data. How many of you know what LinkedIn is? Okay, do you know that LinkedIn mines more data and gathers more data because they asked for it than the government? And this was last night, so I didn't make this up today. But LinkedIn said, here are the 3 things that organizations, leaders, need to develop in others. And I'm going to go in back order. So the third thing is leadership skills. Are you at a place where you're in leadership development? Are you in an institution, a university, where leadership is very important? But leadership is number 3. This is interesting. Number 2 is team building, the importance of team building. And LinkedIn has mined the data to come up with. And number 1 is communication, written and oral. So I see some students in here, and yes, we're going to write 3 more essays in my class this semester. I'm starting unsure about that. But here was the biggest skill that they said is the most popular boot camp of tomorrow, and this was yesterday, the most popular boot camp of tomorrow is to teach people how to have conversations. I didn't make this up. You can go to LinkedIn. So you guys are at boot camp, and you're a day ahead of everybody else. But it said the most popular boot camp of tomorrow is, are you teaching people how to have conversations? I didn't know how I was going to open this talk, but I figured that was a really nice opening. And then they talked about AI. What does AI stand for? Okay, I heard a little bit of artificial intelligence, and I heard a little bit of appreciative inquiry. You're both right. If I was giving you a test or a quiz, you are both right. And this is what else the CEO, and this is from the CEO of LinkedIn. He said, AI, and he's talking about artificial intelligence, cannot be captured or replicated yet of human interaction or touch. Try to think of yourself hugging a robot or interacting with a robot. They're not there yet. But I'm going to talk about the other AI, which is called Appreciative Inquiry. So with that introduction, I figured we're good to go, right? Yes, ma'am. So let's think about the power of our conversations. We probably had bosses or on teams where somebody tells you sales are down, enrollment's down, we got a defect, everything's going wrong. And you can just feel the language of your body when they're telling you what's wrong, what's not good. And you have to talk about those things. And you have to acknowledge the problems and what's wrong as leaders in your organization. But you also have to find a way to spiral up and get solution focused. So what I want you to do is, it's early morning, close your eyes for a minute. I'm not going to make you bright. I want you to think of a time where you had a critical conversation, something you did wrong, something your whole team did wrong. Maybe you got a bad test back. But just think of the time with that person. Maybe it was destructive. Or you didn't get that job offer you wanted. All I want you to do is turn next to your new friend and don't tell them what happened. Just tell them, how did that make you feel? I'm going to give you 10 seconds, okay? And then I'm going to call your attention back. 10 seconds, how did you feel? All right, so I don't want to know how you feel. Matt's paralyzed, but I want you guys to take 3 deep breaths. 3 of them. Get some oxygen. Good morning, gentlemen. Now I want to take you to a time, close your eyes again. I know I never say this in class, but close your eyes again. I want you to think about a time when you had a great conversation, when someone uplifted you, when you got that job, you got that opportunity, when you found out the great news you're having a boy again. But just think about a great conversation with someone. Swati's having a baby boy again. She caught my eye. But think of that great conversation. Now what I want you to do is this, you can tell this great conversation to the person next to you, but how did that conversation kind of make you feel? How are you feeling mentally, physically right now when you're thinking about that great conversation? 10 seconds. All right, attention up front. You guys feeling better now? Okay. This is what a great conversation is. It is good for the heart. It is good for the mind. I have to give credit to Paul Stavros. He did all my slides here. I'll give you a copy if you want them later. That first conversation, when you want to protect or flight, what that does to you in your body. You're in protect mode. And the connect mode. There's a lot on the neuroscience about what I'm going to talk about, how healthy it is for you. And at the end, I'll show you one of the healthiest people in this room that is the empirical proof that this works. And then you're allowed to connect. So there's the neuroscience of leadership that should be taught today because of how your words impact each person. And my colleague Sherry Torres and I, we did some research on, this was really after 20 years of working with my AI, Appreciative Inquiry, how do we bring it into daily conversations? How do you have a conversation worth having? It took 2 title searches to come up with that title. And when the president of the company said, Jackie, believe the statistics, we didn't like that title. And he said, all right, I'll do one more title search for you. I've never done a title search. And then the statistics were even higher. So we had no choice but to go with this title of the book, and we fell in love with it. And the nature of your conversations is the science is asking you to live 80% of your life here. But to guarantee all of you that you probably had conversations that were depreciative, right? Critical conversations. And guess what? The news is, if you spend about 5 to 10% of your time here, that's okay. You're human. But I'm going to teach you how to spiral this way. You will have critical conversations, and they're good to a point. But if all you do is have daily critical conversations, and this 10% goes to 30, 40, 50, 60, 80, it's destructive. And that's not good for you, your health, your mind. The science behind it is destructive conversations are just not good. And hopefully, you've only had anywhere from no destructive conversations to maybe 1 or 2% in your life. These are very unhealthy. You could take a destructive conversation, which is statement-based, coming at each other, and you can learn to start asking questions that are critical because emotions are involved. And it's hard to push up to a conversation worth having, but it can be done. It's really easy to move a critical conversation because the power of inquiry are the key for leaders. It's not having the answers, but knowing to ask questions, and you just have to push it to an appreciative, generative tone. Then you have people thriving, flourishing, productive, and there's engagement. And there's a lot of research behind that. Affirmative conversations are probably what many of you may experience today. Hopefully you'll say, Jackie, that was a nice presentation, and I will say thank you for coming. And say, oh, it was great to meet you. But when one of us breaks the mode and starts to ask a question, and we show curiosity and genuine, that's a conversation worth having. So you want to try to live most of your life here. But if you read the book and you go to page 128, you will have the ain't it awful conversations, the ain't it awful moments because you're human. But now you have a way to push yourself out of this. What is the percentage of time that management spends in communication? Shout it out. What's 80? 50 to 90%, and I'm not talking about the written. Like now we use social media today. 50 to 90% of your time is in communication. That's why you think you never get anything done at work and you have to come back early when no one's around. Yeah, you got to get the work done when there's no more people around. But that's after you get out all your emails, right? And you respond to people. 50 to 90% of your time is there. And if you're not having conversations with others, how many thoughts do you think you process a day? Hundreds. Come on, you didn't listen to my presentation well enough when I was practicing. 70,000. 70,000. So, times that by 100 people in the audience, how many thoughts are we going to have by the end of the day? Okay, so that's the science. All right, so we started, the president mentioned Forbes. One of my dreams was, I wonder if I could ever get my research into Forbes. It was a dream that I had 10 years ago when I thought, wouldn't it be great if my research could end up there? And it's a collaborative research. And I was having dinner with, or lunch with Dr. Marks and one of our doctorate students, Dr. Eager, and we were talking about how do you get into Forbes? I don't know. How do you get into Forbes? That night I got home and said, Forbes is looking for anybody that can comment on conversations. So called my co-author. I said, let's respond. She says, when's it due? And I says, well, it's Wednesday. It's due Monday. But I got a lot to do this week, and let's just knock it out. And so we answered those 6 questions. We turned it over to Forbes. And they said, oh, well, we'll get to it in a few weeks. Due to the polarized times, divisiveness, and other issues, it was the day after some big Kavanaugh-Ford hearing, and this article came out. And what was really cool is the editor didn't talk about what side you were on. He talked about the situation and how to change it. And my favorite question he asked was how to have a do-over conversation. A conversation that you step back and you think, you can say to someone, I'm really sorry, can we do this over again? And have it be a worthwhile conversation. And so that's what I appreciate. But there's also great things going on in the world. And this is Melinda Gates, the Gates Foundation. And she talks about the best ideas in the world and where they come from. So you can take a publication that can talk about everything that's wrong, but also everything that is right. And just to take you on a global level before I bring you local, there is this 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And what intrigued me was my mentor, who created Appreciative Inquiry, co-created with the people at CASE, they were at the United Nations on October 3rd. And the question David Cooperrider said to the United Nations people is, how do we move forward together? So the next time you catch yourself in a real critical or destructive conversation or up against a challenge, this is a real powerful question. How do we move forward together? That's all you have to ask. And I have some design people in here from architect. What's the ideal design question that they always ask a designer? Anybody? How might we? How might we? It's the same as this. How might we? How do we move together? So Aim to Flourish is a program that you'll begin seeing, but it's all about what if we could better every child moving forward. So they're dealing with big issues using what we're going to use in conversations today. But it's all about how do we move forward together. And if you want a copy of my slides and you want to look at some of this stuff, I'm happy to give you so you have the links so you don't have to retype them. So where did Appreciative Inquiry begin? What I want to do in the next half hour is teach you a theory called Appreciative Inquiry and 2 practices, positive framing and generative questions. So we already talked about the conversation framework, but in what little time I have is, this is an important picture and quote, that we live in a world our conversations create. And I noticed this week we had the Henry Ford statue in front of the Buell Building with the LTU shirt on because it was homecoming week, but that's my visual of him. But Henry Ford said, if you think you can, you can. And guess what? If you think you can't, you can't. And so Appreciative Inquiry came from the Cleveland Clinic. David Cooperrider was a young doctorate student at the time, and Suresh, his advisor, said, we got to go find out how do we create, and this was 1985, the best world-class, what are we going to call the Cleveland Clinic? What are we going to be known for? And he sent 3 doctoral students in to ask questions about the problems and what was going on. And they came back very frustrated. They talked to doctors, they talked to nurses, staff, and patients. And it was they were just humiliated by it and destructiveness. And Suresh said, inquiry is powerful. Look at all the negative emotions you 3 doctorate students created going into the Cleveland Clinic. And Cooperrider said, well, what if we asked questions in a different way? What if we asked what was going on right? And how do we work together? And that's simply how appreciative inquiry started in 1987. It was the power of how you ask a question. I can ask a question that can make you feel really bad, or I can ask a question that you can open up. So if you remember one question today, how might we, or how might we work together or move forward together, that's a generative question when all else is going wrong. So it came out of the Cleveland Clinic. What causes a human system to be at its best? It's how you treat that human system. So if you're in that affirmative frame and you're treating people positively and affirmatively, that's a great start. But sooner or later, you got to start asking questions, and questions that open people up. So appreciative inquiry, the type I'm going to talk about, is AI, is what was, what is, and what could be, the search of the best. That's the simplest term. You can read papers. I got a great article for if you're skeptical like I was when I was introduced to this in 1995. AI is not just about the positive. It's a great article. AI is not just about the positive. I go back to dictionaries all the time, but appreciative is adding value in being grateful. No matter how desperate you might seem or how great things are going, is how do you add value? Inquiry is about curiosity, wondering, and searching for what gives life. Now what we're learning is the power of inquiry is more than the word appreciative. It's how you ask questions. So appreciative inquiry is the collaborative discovery of what gives life to a living system. That's you and me and whoever we're working with when you are most alive. These are companies using it. So you can look at these and say, hey, I recognize Facebook, I love Ben & Jerry's ice cream, Fairmont Minerals, Clark, United Nations. These are companies that get appreciative inquiry and understand the power of a question. This is a whole nother workshop to talk to you about how these companies are taking really great care of their people and innovating. And there's the Cleveland Clinic. Everybody knows Visa, right? Very interesting thing is when we wrote this book, just like my introduction today, I didn't know how I was going to start the day, but I always trust if I think, how do I come up with a good introduction? It came to me. Well, I lucked out. You could call it luck to LinkedIn. But I was thinking of a way, why is this important? And when we were thinking about the introduction of the book, David Cooperrider is a world scholar, and he wrote the foreword. His foreword was as long as the rest of our chapters in the book. And the editor said, this is deficit approach. You need to cut out 50% of that foreword. We're like, how do we keep it all? And Sherry and I did not have the introduction done, just kind of like I didn't have the introduction done this morning. And the editor said, if Cooperrider will let it be the introduction, you have your introduction done with some tweaks. I already had called David, and I said, what if? Because I'm always anticipating. And I said, done. He said it could be done. And David said, people don't read the foreword. How many of you read the forewords of your books? Okay, good. Usually it's because they're famous. But you know, the good thing about a foreword is the foreword tells you why the book was written. But it became the introduction, and David tells the story of Visa Corporation. And this is Dee Hock's leadership philosophy, that our organizational lives and the lives of others flourish or flounder one conversation at a time. And his legacy is strength-based leadership, Peter Drucker. We'll come back to him. Appreciative Inquiry, Cooperrider. Positive psychology, your well-being. When you're having a really bad moment, think of how your heart feels, how your gut feels, how your head feels, how your whole body becomes achy. There's a lot of well-being. And design thinking really plays into that. That's the how might we. And so the mindset of being appreciative and inquiry-based is people will thrive and flourish, and you'll live a very long life. But Visa Corporation, he was the master of conversations. And he's now called, David calls him the master of conversations. Fast Company calls him the $6 trillion man. But do you see the difference? Two different perspectives of Visa. So AI is not about ignoring the negative. Nobody ever comes to me, about 2% of the time, people will walk up or think, things are great, how do we make it better? People usually say, we got a problem, we got a challenge, we got an issue. It's about seeing the world differently. How do you reframe and ask generative questions? So one great conversation can shift the direction of change forever. So remember that. And when you look at conversations, one of the first stories we talk about is Alicia. She's in charge of an ER because the other person got fired of being in the ER. And there were lots of problems in the emergency room. Who to blame? Why was stats down? Why was performance? Why do we have the worst ER in here? And I love this. Age, you mean now or when I first sat down in the ER? And what happened with Alicia is when she thought about this, she got desperate and she found this thing called AI, which was Appreciative Inquiry. And she says, I'm going about this all wrong. Not only am I miserable, I'm making the rest of you miserable. And guess what? I go home at night. Who else am I making miserable? The family. And so she really looked into the power of how do I connect and turn around this ER room. And then what we talk about is she learned about appreciative inquiry and 2 practices. We talk about this in our book. How do you positively frame something and ask a generative question? It's not that difficult, but you have to listen. You guys know this guy? Curious George. It's all about being curious. When you ask a generative question, you lean in. If all I want to do is say good morning to you, I get to say good morning and keep on walking. But when you choose to say to someone, how are you? You need to stop walking because you ask the question, how are you? And when you're in that moment and they're saying, oh, I'm doing really lousy, I got this point and then thing, next time, try asking a generative question and saying, how might I help you? What do you really want to see happen? A generative question, if you learn how to ask a generative question, you can almost flip somebody and have fun with them in the moment instead of flipping somebody off, okay? You can really flip them, and you can kind of see what I call magic, but there is a science behind it. And Curious George knows how to do this. He's been doing it, for a long time. He's very curious. So what happened was, let's go back to positive framing. You always identify the issue. You have a problem, you have a complaint. How many people have problems or complaints in their work? Pretty much all of us. And how do you name it? And the positive opposite can be easy most of the time. One of the stories I like to give is British Airways. They used appreciative inquiry. And they used it just before 9/11, if you remember that date. And British Airways had a problem with lost baggage, right? That's the problem. So the positive opposite would be? No lost baggage. Found it. Okay, but you don't want to stop there, okay? Alicia, low patient satisfaction, flip it, high patient satisfaction. That just solves a problem. It doesn't move you forward because you have a problem, right? One time somebody came up to me and said, if you make this decision, Jackie, true story, you will be 6 feet under. I thought, I already am 6 feet under. So if I make a decision, maybe I'll be 2 feet under. It's a true story. And there was a destructive moment. But the framing is key. So going back to British Airways is what they really wanted to study, and this was with 1,200 agents in North America, is how do we create an exceptional arrival experience? If we look at exceptional arrival experience, do you think the luggage issue will be solved? But they also came up with a lot of other issues, challenges, opportunities, initiatives for exceptional arrival experience. When 9/11 came, those of you who can remember, the airlines were tanking, bankruptcy, lots of problems. There were 2 airlines that didn't take a bailout, British Airways and Southwest Airlines. They used that as a time of great change in their organizations and how to create challenging opportunities, and they framed it. So what Alicia did is she said, frame it. Patients are well cared for and highly satisfied. If I can get the ER there, then what begins to happen? And the nurses at first and the doctors thought she was crazy, but they began having meetings with more generative questions and what was going on right, processes, procedures, techniques they could duplicate, and everybody was like, what's going on in the ER? And then it spread throughout the whole hospital, and so it went beyond the ER issues, but it also created a right place, right care, so people knew, when do you go to the ER versus when you go to an urgent care versus when you make a doctor's appointment. So they did more than solve the negative metrics, and that's what's really important. So it's talking about what you want to be outcome focused on versus what's always wrong. So a generative question builds genuine connection, develops a shared understanding, makes the invisible visible, and so on. In your packet, the last sheet is all kinds of generative questions that I'm going to give you a few moments to practice. I have a few students here. I always do open book exams, so you have the sheet in front of you, okay? And then you have this colorful name it, flip it, frame it. So we're going to get out. We're going to do a little exercise together. And what I want you to do, but let me explain the directions first and give you some joggers, is you start with positive framing when you know you have a problem or complaint and negative results of the impact. And then the flip it is the positive opposite, what you want more of. The challenge is, how do I frame it? And this is important, this is why. It's the positive impact of the flip is where you need to focus your energy. If all I focus on is luggage arrives, luggage arrives, luggage arrives, I'm solving a problem, but I'm really not moving forward because I had a problem. But if I focus on the outcome of exceptional arrival experience or a great ER room and happy patients, I begin to address not only the problem and the opposite, but I'm looking at the results of my impact because I've asked a generative question. And I'm going to ask you to choose a situation, flip it to frame a conversation, and pick one or two questions that can move it beyond the positive opposite. Here's a couple ideas. Do any of you have poor communication in the workplace? Not being fiscally responsible, over budget. Is there gossip? Jumping to conclusions. How about cell phones, smartphones, people on laptops while in meetings? That never happens, right? So I came up with just a bunch. Or you can name something else you're dealing with. So what I want you to do is you can take one of these issues, name it, flip it, and what's a generative question? So I just want you to sit alone for a minute. And then when I say talk to someone, share that, and sometimes they can help you flip it and come up with a better question. So I want you each to name it, flip it, and frame it on your own. Keep your eyes on your own paper. Write down the problem, the challenge, and flip it. And then you have a cheat sheet there of generative questions, or the question, how might we? Okay, I see some of you are already talking, working together, so all of you can talk and work together and see if you help them. Where I want you to really help them is make sure the positive opposite is what they want, but what is a question you could ask, and what can you do to begin creating solutions to the problem you have? So I'm going to give you a minute to share on each end. Ready? You guys know what you have to do? Go. All right, can I draw your attention back up front? I just want to give you a taste of the flipping process. So the point of this is I can have a great idea and get really excited when I come to a meeting. But the true solution is going to be I get to present my idea, and then you get to ask questions, and then you get to have an idea. It's the generativity that flows forward because we're having a conversation worth having. So that's the point of this, is that you begin to have it with each other.
Can you help us?
Yes, Matt.
Okay. So one of the
Enrollment is down.
As an example. So the flip, wouldn't the flip be, we need more students?
Yeah, enrollment goes up. You want enrollment
So
more.
then the framing might be, we have a goal of blank to get more students.
I would say let's have a conversation about how do we get everybody engaged in enrollment? How might we? Do you see, you don't want to jump to specific recommendations yet, but you can throw things out. So it's having a conversation of where is enrollment going up? Let's really look at the numbers, because I know there's places where enrollment is up, right? Why is enrollment up there? What are we learning from them? It's the conversation you're having to look at the problem, to flip it. The flip it sometimes is very easy. We want enrollment, but it's a conversation you're going to have and what you're going to pay attention to bring enrollment up as a whole. But where's it working well? And what can we do more of? And where can we put our resources? So that's the conversation you have to be. And it's not, you can't just say, enrollment, that's admissions job. My job is to teach. No, that's not right. We have to get all of us engaged in enrollment. Even the students, right? Get your customers engaged. And that's a little bit. So, you know, in a short conversation is the positive opposite is easy at times. At times, and I'll give you a personal example when it's difficult. But if you could get the positive opposite, what did you do? What were the conversations? Where did you put your energy to increase enrollment?
That's the, I think that's the clear part is what we want more. Because if we say enrollment is down, we wouldn't flip it and say we want more decreased enrollment.
No, the positive opposite, enrollment is high.
Students,
right, we want more students, but it's the conversation you're having to get you there is how you begin to frame it. This is where it all begins, so that the focus is on what you want more of, and then you put your energy and your solutions and your conversations around that. If this was easy, everybody would be doing it, right? So it starts one conversation at a time. So when we look back over here is you choose a situation, flip it, pause, and you frame it. I've been having a conversation with people when teens commit suicide. What's the positive opposite? They live. How do we get them to live? So we can get down to really deep conversations that they're using this in other areas to move a system forward.
Can I just play devil's advocate?
You sure can.
Why wouldn't it not be healthier? What is the consequence, perhaps negative, of saying why shouldn't we explore why enrollment is down?
You can explore why a moment is down, but at some point, you have to stop exploring the down and move it up and have that upward spiral. Because if all I am is exploring why things are down, what's wrong, and making excuses and what the weaknesses are and the threat, you see the deficit spiral where we're going? At some point, after your acknowledgement, and you decide how much time you spend here, leaders have to address their problems. And they have to address them publicly. But at some point, what do you really want to happen? How might we work together? Valerie.
Can I offer something, Dr. Cole?
Yeah.
If you're looking at enrollment being down all the time, it's like driving and looking in your rear view mirror the entire time, as opposed to looking at what's in front of you.
And that's the student who's now the teacher. Thank you, Dr. DeVries. Your time will come, all of you. So the question is, we need more connection. And so what you just had is, if you have a moment to pause and step back and say, you know, how am I going to frame this conversation why Jackie is always late to her? It's bringing the team down. We don't like her walking in late. How do I take care of Jackie? She's the problem. You've been there. And then the mentor says, well, why is Jackie always late? Well, she teaches till 12:15 on Wednesdays. And so she gets done at 12:30 and the students need things, and so sometimes she's coming in late. Well, what if we just shifted the meeting a little bit? Do you see what I'm saying? And the conversation begins to think, oh, whoops, we forgot to look at and ask her what would be a better day to meet. So I'm using that as an example. There's actually an example in the book, but you think Jackie, it's her, she's the problem, she's slowing us down. We don't like that she comes in late. And you have to step back and like Matt says, meet them, why is she? And let's figure out a way, how might we all start together? You see the difference there? So that's what's important. So that's when you have time to frame and ask a generative. Sometimes, do you ever walk up into a conversation and you're talking, hold on, yeah. Okay, so you ever walk up to a conversation and saying, and I can pick on this because I'm in higher education, and I can say, you know, we just spent all this money on a new learning management system called Canvas. How come the faculty aren't using it right? Yeah, how come the faculty, you know, you ever get in those critical conversations? And then you're going to be the person because you're like, oh, I just walked into a critical conversation. I'm having the ain't it awful moment about those faculty. One of you, which will be you in this room, will say, there's got to be one faculty member that knows how to use it right. Do you see how you begin to ask a generative question? And you're like, yeah, who just got the technology award at Lawrence? That's the person. It was engineering. Who was it? But you see how you say, that's the faculty member. We have to get using it better. You know, how do we just start the faculty using it right? Well, let's what if we ask them to do these, you see how the conversation moves? And guess what? The students are happy because faculty come prepared. Their material's up there. They're responding to students' emails. But do you see how sometimes you don't frame anything because you've just walked into a critical or destructive or superficial conversation and you join that. But now you know of a generative question that could flip both of you around. And we talk about that in the book. So where you start, it depends. If you have time to think about that problem, like I gave you a few seconds, you can frame it. You can do the positive framing through what's my problem, how do I do the positive opposite, and ask a generative question and move us forward. That's when you have time. Sometimes you are in a conversation with someone and it starts to go south, right? Ask a generative question next time. It might take you 3 seconds or 3 minutes. You might have to walk away for 30 minutes and ask for that do-over conversation and say, I really screwed up. Can we do this over again? So you have to be able to, I don't know where you're going to start. And it's also going to depend where your mindset is. Dr. Raghavan, I saw your hand up.
Sorry, but since the real key here is to come with that proper generative question, let's take that example, and I'm using your name mainly because
I'm late, right?
Never happens. and that is, Jackie is late.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you start asking what, it is not the nice thing that you said where she's teaching till 12:15, and then there are students asking, she actually has no class, she has nothing there, she is just period late.
Okay, so that's the Jack in me. Yeah, Jack.
How do you come and settle that?
So conversations like that have to happen. You never do it in public. But let's talk about Jack instead of Jackie. Jack is late. You would sit down and say, Jack, here's what I value about you. How do I get you to meetings on time? And then you have that conversation and how important it is to get you meetings on time. I work with a colleague that I always have imaginary dates, and I know my deadline date, but his date, is the imaginary, and he always nails the dates with me. But you have to figure out the questions of, and that's something that you have to talk to about. And usually it's to say, yeah, can you give me 15 more minutes or tell me to set my, but there is a solution to move forward. So Jack and Jackie are operating and getting to your meetings on time. But you have to address what the problem is, what's wrong, before you can move forward. Lisa.
I just want to say, Dr. Staros, I think this is amazing because I think when people get to positions of management or leadership and they don't realize that part of their job is professional development for their staff, that instead of having these concrete and positive conversations, they ignore those little challenges that Dr. Raghavan just brought up. And I think this is amazing.
Right. And that's what's really important is we call this framing positive framing. I can't tell you how many times do we call it the positive question, the unconditional. If you look in the history of AI, it's called the positive question. No, you're not always asking a positive question. I can say, tell me how communication is in this organization. I don't know if you're going to go negative I don't know if you are going to go positive. I don't know if you're just going to be just right there in the middle. But I'm asking you, how is communication? Because I do want to know. I may be asking you, how is communication, knowing that it sucks here, right? I'm asking a question that I know the answer to. That's not a generative question. But if I say, how might we communicate in ways that we are all connected and that everybody has a voice? Do you see how I'm asking a generative question? I want to figure out how we communicate well, because I kind of know we're not communicating well. But I go ahead and ask the question. It's how you ask the question. So we spent a lot of time talking that it's a generative question. It's a question that you are really curious to know the answer of. You want to enter a conversation, and you want movement forward. And that's, so which end, where you start, the reason it's a circle is we were like, do we start off chapter 4 with positive framing and generative questions? Now that we wrote the book, we'd probably start off with generative questions. This is why there's always a second edition. And then talk about the positive frame, okay? But the book is out. But we did say in the book, you start wherever you need to start. If you have time to pause and reflect, do the flip. If you're caught in the middle, now you have a cheat sheet. My favorite question on that cheat sheet I gave you is the last one. No matter who you are, I'll say, so tell me what you wish for. If I could grant you 3 wishes, how do we make this better? That's my favorite question. I'm starting to really fall in love with the how might we and how might we move forward together. But up until this morning, mine was, what person doesn't want to tell you what their wishes are, right? What they want. And most of the time, it's not going to be more money. So try that out. So think about what's driving your conversation. There's a set of principles that we're not going to get into, but at the end of the day, it's all about tone and direction. It's your tone and direction impacts the well-being and the health of people. And you have a little card in your packet, a little pocket-sized card, and that has all the principles. That's going deep. You want to go deep and you want to talk about the principles, that's another conversation. But if I was to just show you these here, I would say the Constructionist Principle was that first slide by David Cooperrider that said, we live in the world that our words create. Simultaneity means the moment something comes out of my mouth, whether it's negative or positive, I am impacting everything about you. How I ask the question or how I make the statement. I used to be a lifeguard. You know what we told the kids? Don't run on the deck. What do the kids do? Because all they hear is run. If the command would have been walk on the deck, the walking of the feet would happen before they're like, why am I walking? And that's a lot of the neuroscience of the brain. Poetic principle means you can do this anywhere, anytime, any situation. And anticipatory principle is I kept imaging, how am I going to open up my talk today? And I still didn't have it. And I even went to bed last night, and I remembered seeing something on LinkedIn and it was just something intriguing. So when I got up at 5 a.m. and I got ready, and at 6 a.m. I clicked on it, and the first thing I said to Paul this morning wasn't, hi, how are you? I said, I figured out my opening. Conversations is a boot camp. And I didn't make it up. But it was that anticipatory saying, how do I get people so excited about something that I know for 20 plus years really works? And the positive principle is, and this is an important principle, you guys, the more positive your images are, the more positive your actions are, the more positive the results. The more positive your words on a person, you're going to have a positive impact. 20 years ago, I used to use a red pen to grade. I never use a red pen because all I think about is X's, what's wrong, right? I use purple or blue. I circle, I make stars, and when they're wrong, I tell them what I need more of in the next paper. Very different way of grading versus how I used to grade 10 years ago. And that's because when I got my dissertation back, it was bled all over with the red ink, okay? So I just don't use red ink anymore. These are the magic, it's not the science. There are skeptics in all of us. It took me 3 years after I met David Cooperrider to figure out, how does this work in organizations? And I, like Marty Seligman, you can Google any of these people. And if you're really interested in positive psychology, you can do a whole degree in here. Guys, remember Peter Drucker? Who's Peter Drucker? Father of modern management. I was in Thailand twice. I expected the Pope to be at a Catholic university on a big pedestal. Who was next to him? Peter Drucker. He's up there with the Pope. Barbara Fredrickson, if you're really into emotions, her seminal article was, "What good are positive emotions?" We have done 400,000 studies on stress, morale, and psychology. As a young doctorate student, she got $100,000 to go study. So what good are positive emotions? And now she's a thought leader there at the Broaden and Build. Jane Dutton, Center for Positive Organizations. Who is U of M playing this weekend? That other place, Michigan State. But U of M is 40 minutes that way. They have a World Center for Positive Organizations. Any of you can go to any talk there, get on their listserv, and dive deep into the science of positive organizations. Why does U of M think this is important? 1999, a guy named Ross gave the School of Business, not the university, $100 million to create positive organizational scholarship. Not bad, huh? Put some money there. Just an idea to advancement, people. I've already talked to you about David Cooperrider. It was really nice to see him. I was back at my home ground case talking about some of the earlier things that I've shown you. And, David said, took you 20 years to figure out how to put that into a conversation. That was brilliant. How do we, and I said to David, I said, we make things so complex of studies and articles, but the two practices, the editor said, I don't want 4 things, Jackie and Sherry. I want 2 things that you could tell anybody to do anytime, anywhere, and help put this into conversations. Laura Morgan Roberts, she came from U of M, but she's all about positive identity, diversity, and inclusion, something we hear a lot about. One time she applied for a position, that was before I was tenured, that I applied for, and I found out she got it, and she's like my hero. No wonder I didn't get that position, but I'm really glad I was here. But that was like 15 years ago when I ran into Robin. She's doing amazing, amazing things. She's from Harvard. She was at Harvard. Okay, so just remember the smallest things that leaders do at the right time can have very meaningful outcomes. The smallest things you guys say. Just saying thank you. Thank you. I'm very grateful for your time, Cheryl. That's all you really have to say, and that uplifts a person. And then you want to start an inquiry with them. So this is a little more about team research. I didn't know team building would be number 2 until this morning, but I had this team building slide in here because they made me turn in my slides last week. But the purpose of teams and the science behind them is incredible. That if you look at this, that high-performing teams, positivity is 6-to-1 negative. Inquiry versus advocacy. For every answer, statement, advocacy, you have to have a question. You only need 1-to-1, but you need those 6 positive comments. And then the self versus other. It can't always be about Jackie, 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 but what about you? Research is what I'm always amazed, because I am a skeptic as well. And for those of you that have significant others in your life, and I've already talked about Barbara, if you make 1 negative comment to your spouse or significant other, that's how many positives. And this is what Gottman's research is. It takes you to get out of that negative statement. So remember that next time. It's easier to build a team than it is to make your spouse happy. Okay? Anytime, anywhere, any situation. We didn't know how we were going to end the book either. And this is a picture of Paul, Allie, and Adam with short hair. And the time of my life was I was the interim dean at the time, trying to worry about how do I handle my job and how do I handle a diagnosis of my husband with a stage 4 cancer. And the first thing when you hear stage 4 cancer, you think no solution. It's a stage 4, right? And that's what we were thinking that moment. And I remember it was a Friday night, the day before his birthday, and Dr. Tijwani said, you have a 50-50 chance. Lymphoma stage 4 has a 50-50 chance now. It's going to be a powerful chemo cocktail. It's going to take 9-10 months of chemo, and this is what it was. But I wanted her to say he had an 80-20, and I was reading everything, and I wanted her to tell me he had a stage 2, but he had a stage 4. We kind of know the end of the story right now. But I remember driving back from Detroit to Brighton and saying, how am I going to tell my kids, here's me, Miss Positive Appreciative, how do I appreciate this? Because there wasn't a whole lot to appreciate, I thought, at the moment. And when I got home, Allie was 12 at the time, and the first thing out of her mouth is Dad going to die? And a mom's supposed to say, no, honey, everything will be fine. The only thing I could think of, I met her where she was at, I said, Allie, we're all going to die. It was not the answer she was looking for. And she writes the story in the book. She tells it, we all have our different perceptions. Adam was 10 years old at the time. And so in the story, we talk about the genitive conversation that we had and what we had to do. And I do remember vaguely that I had brought him home after about 30 days in the hospital, and he had a relapse from the chemo. And it's like, okay, back in the car, back to the hospital. And I remember vaguely, Allie and Adam were really nervous, and I had to call Aunt Robbie and get her to the house because I had to get Paul to the hospital back. And Adam said something to Allie, Dad looks really bad. And she said, Adam, we're all going to die, just be positive. But that's a 12-year-old interpretation to a 10-year-old that this works. Okay, that part I didn't put in the book, but that's how I knew it was working when I got back out the door. So even when things are desperately wrong for you, and when you're the person studying this, it does work. It really does work. So as a university professor, you have that card. I'm going to open it up for questions, but here's what I want to do is I'm going to give you guys some homework. I'm good at giving homework. I want you to reflect and write 3 things you learned or ideas that emerged this morning. What is one thing you will do to learn more? And what is one thing you will do different in your next conversation? So it's not going to be share, pair, and talk because I want to open it up to questions. But just what's one thing you learned that emerged this morning? I learned that we should have more conversation boot camps from LinkedIn. But what is one more thing you'll do differently? And if you want a copy of my PowerPoints, just give me your card, or if there's a resource, like what's that article you said AI is, just give me your business card. I'm happy to share any of my slides with you. So what I want you to think about is the nature of your conversations. We talked about that first thing this morning. Where are your conversations taking you? How do they make you feel? And conversations are like the water we swim in. What happens over time when you're drinking dirty water or swimming in dirty water? You get sick, right? Yeah. Thank you, Adush. So this is somebody that I want to say something about, because for the 17 of you that didn't have handouts, you took Dr. Marburger's handouts for his meeting later today. But I got something better. When you give up something, I have something better for you to take to your meeting tonight. But Dr. Marburger is here, and he has said this to us many a times at the university. Perpetual optimism is a force multiplier. He uses this quote all the time. You guys get his emails, right? And what he said about appreciative inquiry is it changes the direction of any conversation, and it results in connections, knowledge, and innovation. I asked him if I could tell you how old he is today, and he said I could. But could you imagine, could you stand up, Dr. Marburger, being 90 years old and still coming to work? You know, he's my model to think, I'm going to work till my head hits the desk, okay? And I tell Paul that often. But imagine being 90 years old, and here at 8:30 in the morning, he's got a board meeting tonight. He has an office here. He goes to the field house. That's pretty amazing. That's worth clapping about.